All right, welcome back to the channel. So, Errol Spence Jr. lays down the law with Danny Garcia, tells Danny Garcia exactly how and why he's going to beat him. And also, Brian Kenny can't help himself. It is clear, dude, that Brian Kenny is trying to mess with Errol Spence, and Errol Spence don't like Brian Kenny very much. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. So in this video, we're going to talk about two things. First thing we're going to talk about is the interview that took place with Errol Spence Jr. and Danny Garcia in the lead-in to their fight that's going to be taking place on November 7th. So we're going to talk about what Errol Spence Jr.'s breakdown of that fight and his breakdown specifically of Danny Garcia, which, dude, is pretty much spot on, man. Pretty much spot on, man. I got microphone issues. Microphone won't check. Okay, so very much spot on, I think. And then in the second part, so make sure you stay through the interview, man. Brian Kenny tried to throw a jab at Errol Spence Jr. towards the end of the interview. And it explains why Errol Spence Jr. tweeted something out maybe about 3 days before. If you didn't see the tweet, you should go check out the tweet, but we'll talk about that. So those are the two things we're going to cover in this video. So make sure you stay tuned throughout the whole video so we can chop it up about these two subjects in the comments section. Also, make sure you share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. So Brian Kenny, who used to work for ESPN and is one of the bigger jerks, one of the better jerks in boxing, man. But he's very good at his job, right? Very good at his job. Excellent voice, right? Very, very sharp, punctual. Shows up on time to work every day, right? For years, for multiple media outlets, right? Worked for ESPN. I've seen him cover on shows on DAZN. I've seen him cover shows on Fox, right? So Brian Kenny's just always there, man, and always saying something ignorant to some black fighters, right? Constantly. But anyway, before we get on to that part of Brian Kenny, he asked Errol Spence Jr. about the fight, and so Errol Spence Jr. says why he thinks he's going to win the fight. And he points to, Brian Kenny also asked him what was the toughest part of getting ready for the fight. So, that's more related to the second part. But he says, so as far as Danny Garcia, he says, look, man, Danny Garcia is a one-trick pony. He's a very patient fighter. He's looking for his openings. But pretty much Danny Garcia, the same Danny Garcia that you see in the beginning of the fight is going to be the same Danny Garcia that you're going to see at the end of the fight. The same Danny Garcia that you see fighting Brandon Bam Bam Rios is going to be the same Danny Garcia that you're going to see fight Sean Porter. It's like he's got a way that he goes about his fight, and that's the way that he's going to go about it. And he's a one-trick pony. So as long as you understand what he's going to try to do, then you should be able to deal with it. Now, when Errol Spence Jr. is talking about himself versus Danny Garcia, he says, look, man, I can fight in multiple ways. I can do pretty much whatever I want to do in there. So, if one style's not working for me, hey man, I can switch it up and I can do something else. I'm just much more versatile than Danny Garcia. So, hey man, I'm about to get ready to mop Danny Garcia, right? Now, let's think for a second about whether or not what Errol Spence Jr. is that true about Danny Garcia. And I think that essentially it is. I think that Danny Garcia is that he is a fundamentally sound fighter, and that he has a calculated approach to the sport, to boxing. I don't think that he really has, I've never seen him really, in all of the fights that I've seen him fight, I've never seen him play the outboxer role. I've never seen him, just shift, box, jab, slip and move. I've never seen that out of him versus like Errol Spence, where I've seen two dramatically different style of fights out of Errol Spence Jr. Specifically, what he did, the most obvious one is what he did with excuse me, I got a text with Mikey Garcia. Going into the Mikey Garcia fight, the idea was that Errol Spence Jr. was just gonna mow over Mikey Garcia. and fight Mikey Garcia in the same fashion that he dismantled Kell Brook and dismantled Chris Algieri and Leonard Bundu and Kell Brook, right? That you would expect to see that same Errol Spence in the fight with Mikey Garcia. But when you got into the ring, it was completely different. It didn't look like Errol Spence Jr. was the guy that was out thinking Mikey Garcia. He was the guy that was out jabbing Mikey Garcia. He had better hand speed than Mikey Garcia. He had better foot speed than Mikey Garcia. He fought on the outside when he wanted to against Mikey Garcia. He fought on the inside when he wanted against Mikey Garcia, but just long enough to get in, do his damage, and get out, right? And pretty much gave Mikey Garcia absolutely, positively nothing to work with the whole fight. And he did it in a style that was completely different than what people expected. So coming out of the fight, what you saw from Errol Spence Jr. is that he has the ability to fight, that he can beat you at your game. If you are a slugger, he can bang out with you. If you're a slick boxer, he can box with you too. Or he can slide up inside of you and try to get you out of there if you're a slick boxer. So look, man, Errol Spence Jr. is a very, very well-rounded fighter. And, but specifically for this fight, I think that the only real shot that Danny Garcia has is if Errol Spence Jr. is really suffering major issues from the car accident, which brings me to the second point, man, and this Brian Kenny idiot. Like, man, dude, this cat just has no class whatsoever, dude. Like, okay, when Brian Kenny first interviewed Errol Spence Jr., which was on Fox after his accident, right? Everybody knows that Errol Spence Jr. had a car accident. Everybody knows that the dude flipped over multiple times. And so at the end of the interview, Brian Kennedy says something to Errol Spence like, oh yeah, drive safe. Yeah, be safe, drive safe, be safe. And he did the same he did the same stuff after this interview. Hey, Errol, be safe. Dude, it was a year ago, man. How about, Brian, why don't you be safe? Come on, man. I mean, dude, come on, man. Like, Brian, I don't get these commentators, man. These commentators' egos really do get the best of them. Man, your job is to ask Errol Spence Jr. questions. That's your job, okay? Ask them intelligently, ask penetrating questions, right? You can ask difficult questions, but that's your job. Your job is to ask questions of Errol Spence Jr. so that the subscribers or the viewers of your show get to hear what Errol Spence Jr. said. People don't pay for Fox to hear you be snarky, okay? It's like these guys, it's like Brian Kenny has this idea that he wants to be like the what is that guy's name? Howard Cosell back in the 70s, man, just covering Muhammad Ali fights and complaining about him the whole time, right? Like, oh, you should go back and listen to some of the Howard Cosell stuff about Muhammad Ali after Muhammad Ali started fighting, kind of sliding and slipping, right? His tone changed. It becomes very disrespectful to Muhammad Ali. And also it becomes very disrespectful to the sport of boxing, right? Well, we don't need to be showing these type of fights. This fight was a trash fight. It's like Howard Cosell started that whole, let me make myself a bigger personality than the fighter is, right? That type of nonsense. And Larry Merchant tried to carry on with it. Now you got Brian Kenny trying to carry on with it. Obviously, Jim Lampley was that type of guy. Look, man, no wonder Errol Spence Jr. says that Brian Custer is better than Kenny in that regard. And he is, because if you listen to the way Brian Custer carries interviews, he asks very difficult questions. He asks tough questions that boxing fans want to know the answer to. But he doesn't throw his own personal insults and jokes and belittle fighters in the interview. You know what I mean? Kind of like Larry Merchant would do with Floyd Mayweather, right? Like, as soon as the fight is over, or Jim Gray does to fighters. Like, as soon as the fight is over, you start giving in your own personal opinion about fans wanting to see better fights than the fights that you just fought. No, dude, that's not your job. The job is, hey, this was the fight. Who are you going to fight next? Hey, would you be interested in fighting this guy? But the extra little bit about how you think about the fight, or some condescending comment to Errol Spence about make sure now looky here, boy. You make sure you drive safe and make it to the fight without getting in another car accident. Man, you ain't his daddy, Brian Kenny. You know what I mean? And eventually something's gonna come out about you, just like with Larry Merchant and Jim Lampley, right? Jim Lampley wanted to say something crazy about Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Jim Lampley got all kind of issues with him and his wife all over the newspaper, you know? So anyway, man, I'm looking forward to the fight. Commentators are just, man, God dog, they are super hit and miss. But yeah, dude, Brian Kenny, you can learn something from Brian Custer. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think, and with that, I'm out. Peace.